What happens when an empire that has conquered 1,000 worlds encounters the one species that refuses to follow the rules of war? What occurs when beings who have mastered faster-than-light travel, energy shields, and plasma cannons meet creatures who still use projectile weapons and chemical propulsion? The Zephyrian hegemony was about to learn that in the vast cosmos, technological superiority means nothing when faced with the one thing they had never encountered before: pure, unrelenting human stubbornness. They called it the Backwater Incident in their official reports. The humans called it Tuesday. This is the story of how Earth's most outdated warship became the stuff of galactic legend, and why the phrase human ingenuity is now whispered with equal parts terror and respect across 17 star systems. Because sometimes, the best way to win against impossible odds isn't to play by the rules. It's to remind everyone why humans stopped following rules in the first place. The morning that would change galactic history began with Admiral Kexthara of the Zephyrian hegemony, sipping her morning stimulant and reviewing what she assumed would be the most boring intelligence briefing of her career. The holographic display flickered to life above her command table aboard the flagship Stellar Dominion, showing a small blue-green planet orbiting a rather unremarkable yellow star. Earth, her intelligence officer, Commander Veltar, announced with barely concealed amusement. Third planet from their local star. The inhabitants call themselves humans. Population approximately 8 billion. Technology level. He paused, consulting his datapad with what could only be described as professional embarrassment. Well, Admiral, they've barely mastered their own star system. Chemical rockets for propulsion, kinetic projectile weapons, and they still burn fossil fuels for energy on most of their planet. Admiral Kexthara's four eyes blinked in sequence, a Zephyrian expression of disbelief. You're telling me that High Command wants us to deploy a full battle fleet against a species that hasn't even achieved faster-than-light travel? The Hegemony Council is being thorough, Admiral. Every system within 50 light-years of our new territorial expansion must be brought under control or eliminated as a potential threat. The Admiral's tentacles writhed slightly, betraying her incredulity. In her 300 years of military service, she had conquered rebellious colonies with antimatter weapons, subjugated warrior races that could tear starships apart with their bare claws, and brought order to star systems where the very laws of physics seemed negotiable. Now she was being asked to intimidate a species that, according to the reports, still used wheels for transportation. What's their fleet composition? She asked, more out of habit than genuine concern. Commander Veltar's expression grew even more amused. They have approximately 200 vessels they classify as warships, though by our standards, they're barely qualified as system defense boats. No energy shields, no plasma weaponry, no quantum torpedoes. Their largest vessel is something called an aircraft carrier, which apparently launches smaller atmospheric craft for combat. Atmospheric craft? The Admiral's primary set of eyes widened. They conduct naval warfare in their planet's atmosphere? Not just atmosphere, Admiral. They have separate naval forces for their oceans, their atmosphere, and what they generously call their space force. Their ocean vessels are particularly primitive. They actually float on the surface of their water bodies and fire chemical explosives at each other. The bridge crew erupted in polite Zephyrian laughter, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Admiral Kexthara herself couldn't suppress a genuine chuckle. And High Command believes this species represents a threat worthy of our attention? The Council's xenobiologists suggest they might be unusually aggressive for their technological level, Veltar replied, scrolling through his notes. Apparently, they've been in almost continuous warfare throughout their recorded history. They've also shown remarkable adaptability and something their scientists call technological acceleration, rapid advancement when pressured. Fascinating from an academic perspective, the Admiral mused, but hardly relevant to our current mission. How many ships do we have in the fleet?
47 vessels, Admiral.
3 dreadnoughts, 12 heavy cruisers, 20 destroyers, and 10 support ships. The Stellar Dominion alone outmasses their entire fleet by a factor of 3. Admiral Kexthara stood and walked to the massive viewing port that dominated one wall of her command center. Through the transparent aluminum, she could see the assembled might of Battle Fleet Tertius, hanging in space like a constellation of artificial stars. Each ship was a masterwork of Zephyrian engineering, armed with weapons that could crack planets and shielded by energy barriers that could withstand the heart of a star. Send the standard intimidation message, she ordered. Full diplomatic protocol. We'll give them the usual options: immediate surrender and integration into the hegemony, or face the consequences of defying galactic order? Yes, Admiral. Shall I prepare the usual demonstration? The Admiral nodded. Standard procedure called for a show of force, usually the complete annihilation of a moon or large asteroid, to demonstrate the futility of resistance. Most civilizations surrendered immediately after such displays. A few required the actual destruction of an outlying colony or military installation. She had never encountered a species that required more than that. Target their largest moon for the demonstration. Something impressive but not catastrophic to their planet's ecosystem. We want them awed, not extinct. As Commander Veltar moved to carry out her orders, Admiral Kexthara reflected on the absurdity of the situation. Battlefleet Tertius had been assembled to crush the Endorian rebellion, a conflict that had consumed 3 star systems and required the combined might of 2 sector fleets to resolve. Now that same fleet was being deployed against a species that probably couldn't damage their ships even if the Zephyrians turned off their shields. The communication array hummed to life, broadcasting across the electromagnetic spectrum on every frequency the humans might conceivably monitor. The message was simple and, in the Admiral's experience, effective. People of Earth, I am Admiral Kexthara of the Zephyrian hegemony. Your system has been designated for incorporation into our territorial sphere. You have 72 of your hours to transmit an unconditional surrender. Failure to comply will result in the systematic destruction of your military capabilities and the imposition of hegemony rule by force.
To demonstrate our sincerity, observe.
The Admiral gestured to a weapons officer who targeted the Earth's moon with a single antimatter torpedo. The weapon streaked across space faster than human sensors could track, striking the lunar surface with the force of 100 hydrogen bombs. A new crater, visible to the naked eye from Earth's surface, bloomed on the moon's face like a flower of destruction. Message sent, Admiral, Veltar reported. Their communication networks are quite active. Significant electromagnetic chatter across their planet. Panic, no doubt, the Admiral observed. Most species require some time to process the reality of their situation. We'll give them their 72 hours, but I expect their surrender long before then. She was wrong. The first hint that this would not proceed according to standard protocol came 18 hours later. Instead of the expected surrender transmission, Earth sent a response that left the entire bridge crew staring at their translation matrices in bewilderment. Admiral, the communications officer reported, her voice uncertain, we're receiving a response from Earth. It's unusual. Display it. The holographic projector flickered, revealing the image of an elderly human male in what appeared to be a primitive military uniform. His hair was white, his face lined with age, but his eyes held a gleam that made Admiral Kekthara's tentacles twitch with unease. Admiral Kekthara of the Zephyrian hegemony, the human began, his voice calm and measured. I am Admiral James Harrison, commander of the United Earth Defense Force. We have received your ultimatum and observed your demonstration of force. We appreciate your courtesy in providing advance notice of your intentions. The Zephyrian crew exchanged glances. This was not the usual terrified babbling they expected from technologically inferior species. The human continued. However, I must respectfully decline your generous offer of surrender. Earth has a long tradition of responding to ultimatums with vigorous disagreement. We would be happy to discuss terms for your peaceful withdrawal from our system. We understand that mistakes can happen in interstellar affairs, and we bear no ill will toward your empire. Admiral Kexthara's 4 eyes blinked in rapid sequence. Did he just offer us terms for withdrawal? I believe so, Admiral, Veltar confirmed, consulting his translation matrix. The linguistic analysis indicates he's being sincere, though there may be cultural concepts we're not fully grasping. The human's image continued. We've taken the liberty of launching a single vessel to serve as our primary negotiation platform. The UES Indomitable will reach your position in approximately 36 hours. We trust you'll extend appropriate diplomatic courtesies to our representative. The transmission ended. Admiral Kexthara stared at the empty hologram for a long moment. They're sending one ship? Apparently, Admiral. Against a battle fleet of 47 vessels? So it would seem. Are they perhaps suffering from a species-wide delusion? Some form of collective madness? Commander Veltar consulted his xenobiological database. The psychological profiles are complex, Admiral. Humans appear to have an unusual relationship with probability and risk assessment. There are numerous historical examples of humans attacking numerically superior forces despite having no reasonable chance of victory, and sometimes they win. Admiral Kexthara's tentacles performed a complex gesture that, roughly translated, meant impossible nonsense. Commander, one vessel cannot threaten a battle fleet. This is a fundamental law of military science. Yes, Admiral, though I should note that humans appear to have a complicated relationship with fundamental laws in general. The Admiral dismissed this observation with a wave.
Very well.
When their ship arrives, we'll destroy it as an object lesson, and proceed with the subjugation of their planet. Perhaps watching their negotiation platform disintegrate will convince them of reality's constraints. She had no way of knowing that the US Indomitable had been selected for this mission precisely because it was already considered a total loss. Launched 30 years earlier and scheduled for decommission, it was staffed by volunteers who had specifically requested what they knew would be a one-way mission. The ship's captain, Marcus Webb, had been chosen not for his diplomatic skills, but for his reputation as someone who became more competent the more impossible his situation became. As the Indomitable accelerated toward the Zephyrian fleet using chemical rockets that would have been considered obsolete by galactic standards for 2,000 years, Captain Webb stood on his bridge reviewing the intelligence reports Earth had gathered about their visitors. The information was limited, but it painted a picture of a technologically advanced civilization accustomed to easy victories against overwhelming military superiority. Weapons status? He inquired of his tactical officer. All conventional warheads armed and ready, Captain. Nuclear arsenal is primed. The special package is secured in Cargo Bay 3. Very good. Communications? Earth Command is standing by. All frequencies monitored. Captain Webb nodded and turned to address his crew. These men and women had volunteered for what everyone understood was almost certainly a suicide mission. They deserved honesty. Ladies and gentlemen, in approximately 34 hours we're going to arrive at the position of an alien fleet that outguns us, outmasses us, and possesses technology we can barely comprehend. Standard military doctrine would classify our mission as impossible. He paused, looking around at the faces of his crew. Fortunately, we're human, and we have a long tradition of accomplishing impossible things just to see if we can. Our job is not to win a battle. Our job is to demonstrate that humanity does not surrender. Ever. The crew responded with a cheer that would have puzzled any alien observer. Humans, it seemed, became more enthusiastic when presented with hopeless situations. Admiral Kexthara, reviewing the approaching human vessel on her tactical display, felt a growing sense of unease. The ship was primitive by every measurable standard, but there was something about its approach vector that bothered her. It wasn't coming straight toward the fleet in a diplomatic approach. Instead, it was following a complex trajectory that would bring it dangerously close to several of her vessels before reaching the flagship. Commander Veltar analyzed their approach pattern. It appears to be a standard diplomatic formation, Admiral, though they're taking an unusually indirect route. Unusually indirect? They seem to be planning to pass within weapons range of 7 of our ships before reaching us. That's either very trusting or very stupid. With humans, Admiral, I'm beginning to suspect those might be the same thing. The UES Indomitable approached Battlefleet Tertius like a minnow swimming toward a school of sharks. From Admiral Kexthara's perspective on the stellar Dominion, the human vessel looked impossibly fragile. Its hull was composed of primitive metal alloys, its propulsion system left a visible chemical trail, and its weapons were so basic that her tactical computers had difficulty classifying them as threats. Captain Marcus Webb stood on his bridge, watching the alien fleet grow larger on his forward display. Each enemy ship dwarfed his vessel, their sleek forms bristling with weapons he couldn't identify and protected by energy fields that made them shimmer like mirages. By every rational measure, he was leading his crew to certain death. Captain, his tactical officer reported, we're getting detailed scans from multiple sources. They're not even trying to hide their sensor sweeps. Why would they? Webb replied calmly. From their perspective, we're about as threatening as a soap bubble. Sir, the flagship is hailing us. Put them through. Admiral Kexthara's image appeared on the main screen, her 4 eyes examining the human bridge with obvious curiosity. Captain of the human vessel, I am Admiral Kexthara. You are entering a restricted military zone. State your intentions. Webb straightened his uniform and met her gaze. Admiral Kexthara, I'm Captain Marcus Webb of the United Earth ship Indomitable. I'm here to negotiate terms for the peaceful resolution of our current disagreement. The Admiral's tentacles performed what Webb's xenological briefings identified as a gesture of amusement. Captain Webb, you appear to be under several misconceptions. First, this is not a negotiation. This is an opportunity for your species to surrender before we demonstrate the consequences of defiance. Second, You are in no position to dictate terms of any kind. With respect, Admiral, I disagree on both points. The Zephyrian bridge crew erupted in their wind-chimed laughter. Admiral Kekstara herself seemed genuinely entertained by the humans' response. Captain Webb, perhaps you haven't grasped the nature of your situation. Your vessel mounts weapons that could not penetrate our navigation shields. Your entire fleet could not damage a single one of our destroyer escorts. What could you possibly offer in negotiation? Webb smiled, an expression that didn't translate well across species but somehow conveyed more confidence than the situation warranted. Admiral, has your intelligence service provided you with detailed information about human psychology? We understand your species to be unusually aggressive despite your technological limitations. That's incomplete. The thing about humans, Admiral, is that we have a very particular relationship with impossible situations. When faced with overwhelming odds, we don't typically surrender. We get creative. Admiral Kekstara's eyes narrowed. Creative in what way? Well, for example, we've been monitoring your fleet's communications since you arrived in our system. Your security protocols are quite sophisticated, but you're broadcasting on quantum frequencies that we can detect even if we can't decode them. The interesting thing is the pattern of your transmissions. Explain. Webb gestured to his communications officer, who brought up a display showing transmission patterns from the Zephyrian fleet. Your ships communicate with each other constantly, maintaining perfect coordination through quantum entanglement networks. It's very impressive. It also means that every ship in your fleet is connected to every other ship through active quantum links. Your point, Captain? Our point, Admiral, is that we've had 36 hours to study those links. And while we can't break your encryption, we don't actually need to. Admiral Kekstara's confidence wavered slightly. Continue. Are you familiar with the concept of quantum cascade resonance? The question hit the Zephyrian bridge like a physical blow. Admiral Kekstara's four eyes widened simultaneously, and several of her officers began frantically checking their instruments. You can't possibly have weaponized quantum cascade resonance, the Admiral said. But her voice lacked conviction. Your technology level is irrelevant when you're dealing with basic quantum physics. Webb finished. Quantum entanglement networks are remarkable for coordination. They're also remarkably vulnerable to the right kind of interference. Commander Veltar was now openly panicking, his claws flying over his console. Admiral, if they induce a cascade resonance in our quantum network, it could propagate through the entire fleet's communication system. The feedback could overload our navigation computers, weapons targeting, even life support. But that would require a quantum resonance generator, Admiral Kekstara protested. They don't have the technology to build such a device. Webb's smile widened. Admiral, we don't need to build one. We just need to create the right conditions for a natural resonance cascade. And fortunately, we happen to be carrying exactly the right equipment for that purpose. What equipment? Are you familiar with our nuclear weapons? The question seemed absurd. Nuclear weapons were among the most primitive forms of mass destruction, barely more sophisticated than chemical explosives. Admiral Kekstara's confusion was evident. Captain Webb, nuclear weapons cannot threaten our vessels. Our shields can absorb nuclear explosions without strain. Oh, we're not planning to attack your ships with nuclear weapons, Admiral. That would be pointless, as you correctly note. However, we've made some modifications to our nuclear arsenal that you might find interesting. Webb nodded to his tactical officer, who brought up a technical schematic on the main display. To Admiral Kekstara, it looked like a standard human nuclear warhead with some additional components attached. This is a cobalt-enhanced nuclear device surrounded by a quantum fluctuation matrix. When detonated, it creates a very specific pattern of subspace disturbance. Under normal circumstances, this would just be an interesting physics experiment. However, when detonated in close proximity to an active quantum entanglement network, he left the sentence hanging. Admiral Kekstara stared at the schematic, her military training warring with her scientific knowledge. Quantum cascade resonance was a theoretical possibility that every fleet commander was warned about. But no civilization had ever been primitive enough to actually weaponize it. The irony was staggering. The more advanced your communication system, the more vulnerable you were to this particular attack. You're bluffing, she said, but her voice carried no conviction. Admiral, I'm going to be completely honest with you. This plan has approximately a 30% chance of success. There's a 40% chance it will accomplish nothing except the destruction of my ship. And there's a 30% chance it will trigger a quantum cascade that destroys both your fleet and mine. And you consider those acceptable odds? Admiral,
From a human perspective, anything better than certain death represents a significant improvement in our tactical situation.
The Zephyrian bridge was now in barely controlled chaos as officers ran calculations and cross-checked their quantum communication protocols. Admiral Kexthara found herself facing a scenario that no military academy had prepared her for. An enemy so technologically primitive that they were immune to conventional strategic thinking.
"Captain Webb," she said slowly, "you're telling me that you're willing to risk the destruction of your own ship on a 30% chance of damaging our fleet?"
Admiral, I should clarify something about human psychology. When we say willing to risk, what we actually mean is eager to attempt.
My crew volunteered for this mission knowing it was almost certainly one way. The possibility of taking some of you with us is just a bonus. Commander Veltar looked up from his console, his expression grim. Admiral, I've run the calculations. If they detonate a quantum fluctuation matrix in close proximity to our network, the cascade could propagate through our entire communication grid within minutes. Every ship in the fleet could lose navigation, targeting, life support. How long would it take to shut down our quantum network and switch to conventional communications? 47 minutes for a complete shutdown and restart, Admiral. But during that time, we'd be operating blind, each ship isolated from the others. Admiral Kexthara realized with growing horror that she was being outmaneuvered by a species that didn't even understand the technology they were threatening to exploit. It was like being checkmate by someone who had never learned the rules of chess, but was very good at throwing the pieces at your head. Captain Webb, she said carefully, assuming for the sake of argument that you're not bluffing, what exactly are you proposing? A simple exchange, Admiral. You withdraw your fleet from our system, and we don't detonate our quantum resonance device. Everyone goes home alive, and we can pretend this unfortunate misunderstanding never happened. And if I refuse? Webb shrugged, a gesture that somehow conveyed both resignation and determination. Then we find out who built better equipment, your quantum network engineers or our nuclear weapons designers. Either way, this becomes a much more interesting afternoon. Admiral Kexthara found herself in the peculiar position of being threatened by a weapon she could have built herself in a laboratory, wielded by a species that probably didn't fully understand how it worked.
The tactical absurdity was overwhelming.
You realize, she said, that even if you succeed in disabling our fleet, you cannot prevent the hegemony from returning with a larger force?
Admiral, let me share something about human strategic thinking. We very rarely plan more than one move ahead.
Right now, our goal is to survive the next hour. If we accomplish that, we'll worry about next week when it arrives. That's not a sustainable military strategy. It's not supposed to be sustainable, Admiral. It's supposed to be impossible to predict or counter. The Admiral looked around her bridge, taking in the expressions of her officers. Some showed confusion, others calculation, and a few displayed what could only be described as professional admiration for the human's tactical audacity. Captain Webb, she said finally, I need to consult with my officers. Will you accept a temporary ceasefire while we consider your proposal? Of course, Admiral. We'll maintain our current position and refrain from detonating any quantum resonance devices until you've had time to deliberate. How generous of you. The communication link closed, leaving the Zephyrian bridge in stunned silence. Commander Veltar was the first to speak. Admiral, what are your orders? Admiral Kexthara stared at the tactical display, where the tiny human ship hung in space like a very polite threat. Commander, in your professional opinion, are they bluffing? I honestly don't know, Admiral. Their psychological profiles suggest they're capable of exactly this kind of strategic insanity. And the technical aspects? The quantum cascade resonance is theoretically possible. Their device might work exactly as described, or it might simply create a very bright explosion. The concerning factor is that they genuinely seem not to care which outcome occurs. Admiral Kexthara had conquered 12 star systems and defeated enemies with superior technology, greater numbers, and more advanced tactics. She had never been thwarted by an enemy who admitted their plan probably wouldn't work, but were excited to try it anyway. Admiral, another officer called out. We're receiving additional transmissions from the human ship. Put them through.
Captain Webb's image reappeared, but this time he wasn't alone.
His bridge crew was visible behind him, and their expressions were universally cheerful in a way that made Admiral Kexthara's tentacles twitch nervously. Admiral Kexthara, I hope you don't mind the interruption, but my crew wanted to express their appreciation for this opportunity to participate in such an interesting first contact scenario. Their appreciation? Yes, Admiral. You see, Most of us are career military, and we've never had the chance to face genuinely impossible odds against a technologically superior enemy. It's quite exciting, really. One of the human crew members waved at the screen with obvious enthusiasm. Admiral Kekstara stared at the display in growing bewilderment.
Captain Webb, your crew seems remarkably cheerful for people facing almost certain death. Admiral, I think there might be a cultural translation error here. When humans say we're facing certain death, we don't mean we expect to die.
We mean the situation has become interesting enough to justify our full attention. Actually, Admiral, while I have you, my engineer wanted to ask if your quantum communication network uses standard entanglement protocols or something more exotic. It's not tactically relevant. He's just curious from a technical standpoint. Admiral Kekstara realized that she was dealing with a species that treated potentially fatal combat situations as learning opportunities.
Captain Webb, she said slowly, are all humans like this? Like what, Admiral? So enthusiastic about hopeless situations?
Webb considered the question seriously. Actually, Admiral, these folks are pretty typical.
We chose them for this mission because they're calm under pressure. You should see humans when we actually get excited about something. The Admiral decided she really didn't want to know what excited humans looked like. Admiral Kekstara convened an emergency council of war aboard the Stellar Dominion. Her senior officers gathered in the strategic planning chamber, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright disbelief. On the central holographic display, the UES Indomitable hung in space like a persistent mosquito that had somehow learned to threaten elephants.
Tactical assessment, Commander Velta, the Admiral ordered.
The intelligence officer activated his datapad with obvious reluctance. Admiral, the situation is unprecedented. By every conventional metric, the human vessel represents no threat to our fleet. However, their proposed quantum cascade attack is theoretically viable.
Theoretically?
The physics are sound, Admiral. A quantum fluctuation matrix of sufficient power could trigger a resonance cascade in our communication network. The question is whether their device can actually generate the required quantum interference pattern. Captain Zorthak, the fleet's chief weapons officer, interjected. Even if their device works perfectly, the probability of success remains low. We could simply shut down our quantum network the moment we detect cascade initiation, and operate without coordination for 47 minutes, Admiral Kekstara observed, during which time we would be vulnerable to conventional attack. Admiral, they have one ship, Captain Zorthak protested. Even without our network, we could destroy them with a single destroyer escort. Yes, the Admiral agreed. But consider the broader implications. We came here to demonstrate hegemony power and secure quick surrender. Instead, we're being forced into a tactical withdrawal by a species that builds its starships out of metal and good intentions. The strategic implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Zephyrian hegemony's expansion doctrine relied on overwhelming displays of technological superiority to secure rapid submission from less advanced civilizations. If word spread that humans had forced a hegemony battle fleet to retreat through creative application of primitive technology. Admiral, Commander Velta said quietly, there's another factor to consider. I've been monitoring Earth's global communications during our standoff. And they're not panicking, Admiral. The entire planet knows about our presence, but instead of mass hysteria, they seem to be organizing. Organizing how? Military mobilization, Admiral, but not in any pattern I've seen before. Instead of concentrating their forces for defense, they're dispersing them. Every major population center is evacuating essential personnel while maintaining skeleton military presence. It's as if they're preparing not to repel invasion but to ensure survival. Captain Zorthak's claws clicked against the table. Survival of what? Of their species, Captain. They're not trying to win a war. They're trying to ensure that no matter what we do, some humans will survive to continue their civilization. Admiral Kekstara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental controls. Are you suggesting they've written off their entire planet? I'm suggesting they've accepted the possibility, Admiral. More concerning is what they're doing with their industrial capacity. Instead of building weapons, they're constructing what appear to be long-range communication arrays and data storage facilities in concealed locations. The implications struck the assembled officers like a physical blow. The humans weren't just preparing for defeat. They were preparing to ensure that the galaxy would learn about it. Admiral, Velta continued, I believe Captain Webb's mission isn't just about forcing our withdrawal. It's about gathering intelligence on our capabilities and broadcasting that information to someone. To whom? Unknown. Admiral. But Earth's communication networks have been transmitting detailed information about our ships, our weapons, our tactics. If there are other civilizations monitoring those transmissions, Admiral Kexthara's tentacles performed a complex gesture that roughly translated to bureaucratic nightmare. The hegemony's expansion doctrine assumed that primitive civilizations would either surrender quickly or be destroyed before they could share intelligence about Zephyrian capabilities. The humans appeared to have turned information warfare into a form of posthumous revenge. "Captain Webb," she said, activating the communication system, "I believe we should continue our discussion." The human captain appeared on the display, still annoyingly cheerful.
"Admiral, excellent timing."
My crew was just discussing the finer points of quantum mechanics. Did you know that your entanglement network uses a fascinating variation of Bose-Einstein condensate matrices? We'd love to understand the engineering principles involved. Captain Webb, are you recording our conversations? Admiral, we're recording everything. Complete sensor logs, communication transcripts, tactical data on your fleet composition and capabilities. It's all being transmitted back to Earth and stored in secure facilities across our planet. For what purpose? Webb's expression grew serious for the first time since their conversations began. Admiral, let me be completely honest with you. We know we probably can't win this fight. But we can ensure that every other civilization in this galaxy learns exactly what happened here and how to fight you. That's not a typical military objective. Admiral, humans have a saying, if you're going to lose, lose expensively. We may not be able to save ourselves, but we can make sure our defeat teaches others how to resist you. Admiral Kexthara found herself impressed despite the situation. Captain Webb, you're describing a strategy of deliberate martyrdom. We prefer to think of it as aggressive education, Admiral, though I suppose the practical difference is minimal. Commander Veltar leaned over to whisper urgently in the Admiral's ear. Admiral, this changes everything. If they succeed in broadcasting detailed intelligence about our capabilities, other civilizations will know our weaknesses, she finished.
And humans appear to be very good at finding weaknesses.
Admiral, Webb continued, I should mention that we've identified several interesting vulnerabilities in your fleet configuration. For example, your Dreadnought's shield generators appear to be vulnerable to electromagnetic pulse weapons if struck from specific angles. Your destroyers have blind spots in their sensor coverage that could be exploited by small, fast-moving vessels. And your logistic ships carry what appear to be exotic matter storage containers that would create spectacular explosions if ruptured. The Zephyrian bridge crew exchanged alarmed glances. Captain Zorthak began frantically checking his defensive systems. You're observing all of this with primitive sensors? Admiral Kexthara asked. Admiral, our sensors may be primitive, but our pattern recognition is excellent. Humans are very good at finding ways to break things, especially things that aren't supposed to break. And you're sharing this information with Earth? In real time, Admiral. Along with detailed psychological profiles of your command structure, analysis of your tactical doctrines, and recommendations for asymmetric warfare techniques that could be employed by other civilizations. Admiral Kexthara realized that the situation had evolved far beyond a simple territorial acquisition. The humans had somehow transformed their hopeless last stand into a comprehensive intelligence operation. Captain Webb, she said carefully, what would it take for you to stop transmitting this information? Admiral, I appreciate the question, but I'm afraid that ship has sailed. Earth has already disseminated our initial intelligence package to several other star systems. Even if you destroy us right now, the information is already spreading. What other star systems? Webb's smile returned, broader than before. Well, Admiral, it turns out we're not the only species in this galactic neighborhood that has complicated feelings about imperial expansion. When we started broadcasting on general galactic frequencies, we received some very interested responses. From whom? Let's see. We've been in contact with something called the Regelian Commonwealth, the Free Traders of Vega, and a group that identifies itself only as the Resistance. They've all been very enthusiastic about receiving detailed technical specifications of hegemony military assets. Admiral Kexthara's worst fears crystallized into reality. The Regelian Commonwealth was a loose confederation of systems that had successfully resisted hegemony expansion for decades. The Free Traders were notorious for their ability to rapidly disseminate information across vast distances. And the Resistance was an unknown factor that intelligence services had been trying to identify for years. Captain Webb, you've essentially declared war on the hegemony on behalf of multiple civilizations. Admiral, we prefer to think of it as aggressive networking. Though I suppose the practical difference is minimal. Commander Veltar was now openly panicked. his claws dancing over multiple consoles simultaneously. Admiral, I'm detecting quantum transmission spikes from the human vessel. They're broadcasting something. What are they broadcasting? Everything, Admiral. Complete technical readouts of our entire fleet, detailed tactical analysis, recommendations for countermeasures. It's the most comprehensive intelligence package I've ever seen. Admiral Kextara watched her carefully planned territorial acquisition transform into a galactic intelligence disaster. Captain Webb, you realize this means the hegemony will have to respond with overwhelming force? Admiral, we're counting on it. Excuse me? Webb's expression grew almost predatory. Admiral, let me share something about human strategic thinking that your intelligence services might have missed. When we're faced with an enemy we can't defeat, we don't try to win. We try to make winning so expensive that our enemy questions whether the victory was worth the cost. Elaborate. Simple math, Admiral. Your hegemony operates by quickly overwhelming primitive civilizations and integrating them into your empire. It's efficient because it's cheap. One demonstration of force, one surrender, minimal casualties. But what happens when that efficiency breaks down? Admiral Kextara realized where the conversation was heading, but she couldn't stop herself from asking, what happens? Well, now every civilization in this galactic region knows exactly how your technology works and how to fight it. More importantly, they know you're not invincible. So, instead of quick surrenders, you're going to face prolonged resistance. Instead of efficient conquest, you're going to get expensive wars. Captain Webb, are you suggesting that your goal is to make expansion unprofitable for the hegemony? Admiral, we're not suggesting anything. We're implementing it. The strategic genius of the human approach became clear to Admiral Kextara with the force of a physical blow. By turning their defeat into a comprehensive intelligence operation, the humans had weaponized their own destruction. Every future conquest would be more difficult, more expensive, more costly in both resources and hegemony lives. And the quantum cascade device? She asked. Oh, that's just to ensure you take us seriously while we finish our data transmission. Webb replied cheerfully. We've got about 40 minutes of technical data left to broadcast. The cascade device ensures you'll wait patiently while we complete our mission. Mission? Admiral, our mission was never to defeat your fleet. Our mission was to ensure that every other civilization in the galaxy knows exactly how to fight you. Mission almost accomplished. Admiral Kextara stared at the human captain with a mixture of horror and admiration. She had been completely outmaneuvered by a species that had learned to turn certain defeat into strategic victory. Captain Webb, she said slowly, you've fundamentally altered the balance of power in this galactic region. Admiral, we prefer to think of it as aggressive democracy promotion, though I suppose the practical difference is minimal. On the tactical display, the Indomitable continued its steady transmission, broadcasting the accumulated military secrets of one of the galaxy's most powerful empires to anyone willing to listen. And based on the communication traffic Commander Veltar was monitoring, the galaxy was very interested indeed. The situation aboard the Stellar Dominion had deteriorated from a routine intimidation mission to a full-scale strategic crisis. Admiral Kextara found herself pacing the length of her command center while her officers struggled to calculate the long-term implications of the humans' intelligence operation. Admiral, Commander Veltar reported, his voice strained. The communication traffic is increasing exponentially. We've detected responses from at least 17 different civilizations, including several that we haven't been able to identify. What kind of responses? Requests for additional technical data, confirmation of our capabilities, and, he paused, checking his displays, what appear to be coordination efforts for joint defensive operations. Captain Zorth Acts looked up from his tactical console with an expression of growing alarm. Admiral, I'm detecting movement from several nearby systems. It appears that multiple civilizations are mobilizing their fleets. Mobilizing against us? Unknown, Admiral, but the timing is highly suspicious. 3 of the fleets are moving toward our current position. Admiral Kextara's tentacles performed a complex gesture that roughly translated to impending political catastrophe. The humans had somehow transformed a simple territorial acquisition into the catalyst for a multi-system alliance against the hegemony. Captain Webb, she said, activating the communication system with visible reluctance. The human captain appeared on screen, now accompanied by what appeared to be his entire bridge crew. Their collective enthusiasm was unsettling. Admiral Kextara, perfect timing. We've just received some fascinating technical specifications from our new friends in the Regelian Commonwealth. Did you know that your shield technology is vulnerable to cascading harmonic interference? We never would have thought to try something like that. Captain Webb, I need to understand your strategic objectives.
Admiral, our strategic objectives are quite simple. Survive long enough to complete our data transmission and demonstrate to the galaxy that the hegemony can be resisted.
And
After that?
Webb's expression grew thoughtful. Well, Admiral, we hadn't really planned much beyond don't die immediately, but based on the responses we're getting from other civilizations, it looks like the galaxy is significantly more interested in resisting hegemony expansion than anyone realized. Captain Webb, are you aware that your actions are likely to trigger a multi-system war? Admiral, we prefer to think of it as accelerated diplomacy, though I suppose the practical difference is minimal. Admiral Kextara realized that the humans had not simply resisted conquest, they had accidentally catalyzed a galactic revolution. Captain Webb, the Hegemony Council will not accept this situation. They will respond with overwhelming force. Admiral, let me share something about human psychology that might be relevant. When someone threatens us with overwhelming force, our typical response is to find ways to make overwhelming force prohibitively expensive to deploy. How? Webb gestured to one of his officers who brought up a new display. Well, for example, we've been sharing some interesting theoretical discussions about asymmetric warfare techniques. Did you know that it's possible to build quantum cascade generators using relatively primitive technology? Several civilizations are now very interested in the technical specifications. The implications hit Admiral Kextara like a physical blow. You're teaching other species to build the same weapons you're threatening us with? Admiral, we prefer to think of it as educational outreach.
Knowledge should be freely shared, after all. Captain Webb, you're describing the proliferation of superweapons across multiple star systems.
Admiral, we prefer to think of it as democratizing advanced physics.
Though I suppose the practical difference is minimal. Commander Valtar interrupted with obvious panic. Admiral, I'm detecting quantum signature spikes from multiple locations. It appears that at least 6 different civilizations are attempting to replicate the human cascade device. How is that possible? They've only had the technical data for hours. Admiral, Webb interjected, you might be underestimating the galaxy's motivation to develop effective countermeasures against hegemony expansion. When people are sufficiently motivated, they can accomplish remarkable things in very short time frames. Captain Zorthak looked up from his weapons console with an expression of professional bewilderment. Admiral, I'm analyzing the tactical data the humans are broadcasting. They've identified vulnerabilities in our systems that our own engineers never considered. Such as? For example, our quantum communication network, which we considered unhackable, can apparently be destabilized by coordinated electromagnetic pulse attacks from multiple directions. Our shield generators, which we believed were invulnerable, can be overwhelmed by specific harmonic frequency combinations. And our exotic matter storage systems? Yes. Admiral, if struck by quantum cascade weapons while fully loaded, our logistics ships would essentially become massive bombs that could damage our own fleet. Admiral Kextara stared at her weapons officer in growing horror.
Are you telling me that humans have identified fatal flaws in our military technology using primitive sensors and theoretical physics? Admiral, it appears that humans are exceptionally good at finding ways to break things that aren't supposed to break. And they're sharing this information with anyone who asks? Captain Webb's voice carried across the communication link with obvious pride.
Admiral, we believe that knowledge should be freely shared, especially knowledge about how to resist tyrannical expansion. Captain Webb, you've essentially provided a blueprint for defeating hegemony forces to every civilization in this galactic region. Admiral, we prefer to think of it as publishing an open-source technical manual, though I suppose the practical difference is minimal. The strategic situation had evolved far beyond Admiral Kextara's ability to manage at the fleet level. This was now a matter for the Hegemony Council and the highest levels of strategic command.
Admiral, Commander Veltar reported, we're receiving priority communications from Hegemony Central Command.
The holographic display shifted to show the imposing figure of Supreme Admiral Morthek, whose 4 arms and 6 eyes marked him as a member of the Hegemony's ruling caste. His expression combined fury with barely controlled panic. Admiral Kextara, he began without preamble, explain to me how a routine intimidation mission has resulted in the formation of a multi-system resistance alliance armed with detailed intelligence about our military capabilities. Admiral Kextara's tentacles performed a gesture of profound bewilderment. Supreme Admiral, the humans appear to have weaponized their own defeat. Instead of surrendering or fighting conventionally, they've turned their destruction into a comprehensive intelligence operation.
Are you telling me that they've outsmarted Battlefleet Tertius? Supreme Admiral, they've outsmarted the entire concept of technological superiority.
Supreme Admiral Morthek's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme agitation. Admiral, the Council is demanding immediate resolution.
Destroy the human vessel and withdraw from the system before the situation deteriorates further. Supreme Admiral, destroying the human vessel will not resolve the situation. They've already transmitted their intelligence to multiple civilizations. Killing them now would simply confirm the effectiveness of their strategy. Then what do you recommend? Admiral Kexthara looked at the tactical display, where the tiny human ship continued its steady transmission of hegemony military secrets to anyone willing to listen. Around the edges of the display, she could see the approaching fleets of 3 different civilizations, all now armed with detailed information about hegemony weaknesses.
Supreme Admiral, I recommend that we acknowledge the new strategic reality and consider alternative approaches to expansion in this galactic region. Are you suggesting we negotiate with primitives? Supreme Admiral, I'm suggesting that these primitives have fundamentally altered the balance of power in this region. Our choices between adaptation and facing a coordinated multi-system war against enemies who know exactly how to fight us. The communication link remained silent for several long moments, as Supreme Admiral Morthek considered the implications.
Admiral, Captain Webb's voice interrupted. I hope you don't mind, but we couldn't help overhearing your conversation. Both admirals stared at the human captain in surprise. How did you access our secure communication channel?
Well, Admiral, it turns out that your quantum encryption protocols are vulnerable to the same harmonic interference techniques we've been discussing.
One of our new friends in the vegan free traders shared some fascinating insights about signal interception. Supreme Admiral Morthek's expression shifted from fury to horrified fascination.
Captain, are you telling me that multiple civilizations are now capable of intercepting our secure communications? Supreme Admiral, we prefer to think of it as participatory information sharing, though I suppose the practical difference is minimal. Admiral Kexthara realized with growing dread that the humans had not only shared hegemony military secrets, but had also taught other civilizations how to spy on hegemony communications. Captain Webb, Supreme Admiral Morthek said slowly, what would it take for your species to stop sharing our military secrets with the galaxy? Webb's expression grew genuinely thoughtful.
Supreme Admiral, that's an excellent question. Let me consult with my crew. The human bridge erupted in animated discussion as the crew debated their response. Admiral Kexthara found herself listening to humans casually discuss the terms for ending their inadvertent galactic revolution. Supreme Admiral, Webb said finally, my crew has reached a consensus. We'll stop transmitting your military secrets under one condition.
Name it. The hegemony withdraws from human space and agrees to non-interference treaties with all civilizations that have received our intelligence packages. That would effectively end hegemony expansion in this entire galactic region.
Supreme Admiral, we prefer to think of it as encouraging a more collaborative approach to interstellar relations, though I suppose the practical difference is minimal.
Supreme Admiral Morthek stared at the human captain with an expression of complete bewilderment. Captain Webb, you're asking us to abandon territorial expansion in exchange for your silence? Supreme Admiral, we're not asking for anything. We're offering a trade. Regional peace in exchange for information security. But if you prefer, we can continue broadcasting your military specifications to anyone who's interested. The choice is entirely yours. Admiral Kexthara watched the most powerful military officer in the hegemony struggle with a strategic situation that no military academy had prepared him for. Defeat by creatures who turned their own extinction into a negotiating position. 6 months after the incident that hegemony records would forever classify as the backwater miscalculation, Supreme Admiral Morthek stood before the Hegemony Council in the capital city of Zephyr Prime. The council chamber, carved from a single massive crystal that had once been a moon, housed representatives from 300 subjugated worlds. Today, it felt more like a tribunal than a governing body. Supreme Admiral, Councillor Vextan spoke with the authority of someone whose species had conquered half the galaxy. Explain to us how a single primitive vessel has resulted in the formation of what intelligence now calls the Terran Diplomatic Network. Morthek's 6 eyes focused on the holographic display showing the current galactic strategic situation. Where 6 months ago the hegemony had enjoyed unchallenged expansion in the Outer Rim territories, now a complex web of mutual defense treaties, information-sharing agreements, and technological cooperation pacts had created what amounted to a fortified wall of resistance. Councillor, he began carefully,
The humans appear to have accidentally revolutionized galactic diplomacy. Accidentally? Their initial goal was simply survival. However, their method of ensuring survival, broadcasting our military secrets to anyone willing to listen, catalyzed the formation of the largest interspecies alliance in recorded galactic history.
Councillor Vextane's expression darkened. And this alliance now controls how many systems? 47 star systems have formally joined what they call the Free Galactic Coalition. Councillor,
Another 73 have signed mutual defense agreements, and approximately 200 systems have access to the technical specifications the humans disseminated. The council chamber erupted in the distinctive sound of hundreds of different species, expressing dismay in their native languages. The cacophony was impressive even by galactic standards. Order, Councillor Vexthane commanded. Supreme Admiral, continue your report. The strategic implications are significant, Councillor.
Traditional expansion through technological intimidation is no longer viable in any region where coalition intelligence has penetrated.
Our advantages in quantum communication, shield technology, and exotic matter weapons have been neutralized.
Neutralized how? The humans have taught other species to build countermeasures, Councillor. More concerning, they've taught other species to think like humans. Explain.
Supreme Admiral Morthek activated a tactical display showing recent conflicts.
3 weeks ago, the 7th Fleet attempted to intimidate the Procyon system into surrender. Instead of the expected capitulation, they encountered a defense network using quantum cascade weapons, harmonic shield disruptors, and coordinated electromagnetic pulse attacks.
The 7th Fleet was forced to withdraw after suffering 60% casualties. From Procyonians armed with human tactical doctrine and jury-rigged weapons built from the specifications Captain Webb broadcast. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud.
The hegemony's expansion had been built on technological superiority and predictable responses from inferior civilizations. The humans had somehow taught the galaxy to be unpredictable.
And the current status of the human system? Earth has become the unofficial capital of the Free Galactic Coalition, Councillor. Their system now hosts the largest interspecies diplomatic facility in known space.
They built a diplomatic facility? No, Councillor. The other species built it for them.
Apparently, every civilization that received the Terran intelligence packages wanted to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. Councillor Vextane stared at the display showing Earth's system, now bustling with ships from dozens of different civilizations. And Captain Webb? Captain Webb has been promoted to Admiral of the Coalition Defense Force and serves as Earth's primary diplomatic representative to over 60 species.
The same Captain Webb who threatened our fleet with a possibly non-functional quantum weapon? The same Captain Webb who neutralized our expansion in this galactic region without firing a shot, Councillor. The council chamber fell silent as representatives contemplated the magnitude of their strategic miscalculation.
Councillor Vextane spoke slowly. Supreme Admiral, what is your professional assessment of the current situation? Councillor, the hegemony now faces a choice. Adapt to a multipolar galactic environment or face an alliance of species that have been trained to think like humans.
And thinking like humans means turning every disadvantage into an opportunity, every defeat into an intelligence operation, and every threat into a reason to get creative. Meanwhile, aboard the UES Indomitable, now flagship of the Coalition Defense Force, Admiral Marcus Webb stood in what had once been the cargo bay and was now a diplomatic conference center.
Representatives from 47 species sat around a circular table that had been constructed from materials donated by each member civilization. The result was a work of art that somehow managed to accommodate beings with vastly different physiological requirements. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentient beings, Webb began. We've received another communication from the Hegemony Council. Ambassador KTLTF of the Regalian Commonwealth raised one of her forearms. What are they offering this time? Formal recognition of the coalition, establishment of neutral zones, and a non-aggression pact covering all member systems.
The assembly erupted in the universal sound of diplomatic surprise. Representative Gortak of the Centauri Alliance spoke first.
Admiral Webb, 6 months ago the hegemony considered us all primitive barbarians unworthy of notice. Now they're offering formal recognition? Representative Gorthak, it appears that broadcasting their military secrets to everyone was more effective than we originally calculated.
Ambassador Zixel of the Vegan Free Traders laughed, a sound like crystalline bells.
Admiral, did you anticipate this outcome when you threatened their fleet? Webb smiled, the expression that had somehow become famous across 17 star systems. Ambassador, if I'm being completely honest, our original plan was don't die immediately. Everything after that has been improvisation, and the improvisation has resulted in the largest peaceful alliance in galactic history, observed Counselor Murthane of the Andromedan Collective. Well, Webb replied, humans do tend to get carried away with projects once we start them. The diplomatic humor was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected guest. Admiral Kexthara entered the conference room under escort, her posture carefully neutral. She had requested this meeting through official channels, a development that had surprised everyone. Admiral Kexthara, Webb said, rising from his chair. Welcome aboard the Indomitable. Admiral Webb, she replied, her tone formal but not hostile. I come bearing an official communication from the Hegemony Council. Please, join us. Admiral Kexthara took the seat that had been prepared for her, designed to accommodate Zephyrian physiology. The irony was not lost on anyone present that the chair had been built by the same species that had been threatening to exterminate them 6 months earlier. The Hegemony Council, she began, has authorized me to propose formal peace negotiations between the Hegemony and the Free Galactic Coalition. The silence that followed was deafening. Admiral Kexthara, Webb said carefully, are you suggesting that the Hegemony is prepared to acknowledge the Coalition as an equal negotiating partner? Admiral Webb, the Hegemony is prepared to acknowledge that the galactic situation has fundamentally changed and that adaptation is preferable to prolonged conflict. Ambassador KTLTH leaned forward. What terms is the Hegemony proposing? Mutual recognition, establishment of neutral zones, and agreements on territorial boundaries. The Hegemony would agree to cease expansion in Coalition space in exchange for guarantees that Coalition members will not actively destabilize Hegemony systems. Representative Gorthak's claws clicked against the table. And what about species currently under Hegemony control who might wish to join the Coalition? Admiral Kexthara's tentacles performed a complex gesture. That would be subject to negotiation on a case-by-case basis. The diplomatic implications were staggering. The Hegemony was essentially offering to transform from an expanding empire into a stable regional power-sharing galactic space with an alliance of formerly primitive species. Admiral Kexthara, Webb said slowly, can I ask you a personal question? Of course, Admiral Webb. Do you believe this would have happened if we had simply surrendered when your fleet arrived? Admiral Kexthara considered the question seriously. Admiral Webb, if you had surrendered, Earth would now be another Hegemony colony, and the galactic balance of power would be unchanged. And instead, you've accidentally created a new form of interstellar government based on voluntary cooperation, shared knowledge, and mutual defense. We have a tendency to overcomplicate things. Admiral Webb, you've taught the galaxy that technological inferiority doesn't mean strategic helplessness. Ambassador Zixel interjected. Admiral Kexthara, what is the Hegemony's honest assessment of the Coalition's military capabilities? Ambassador, the Coalition now possesses detailed knowledge of our weaknesses, countermeasures for our primary weapon systems, and tactical doctrines that make traditional conquest prohibitively expensive. More importantly, you've learned to think strategically like humans. And that concerns the Hegemony? Ambassador, humans turn every problem into an opportunity and every defeat into a learning experience. Teaching that mindset to dozens of species has created an alliance that is essentially impossible to defeat through conventional means. Representative Gorthak leaned back in his chair. So the Hegemony's proposal is essentially, we'll stop trying to conquer you if you promise not to teach anyone else how to resist us? That's not entirely inaccurate, Representative. Admiral Webb looked around the table at the assembled representatives of species that 6 months ago had barely known of each other's existence. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentient beings, I believe we have some negotiating to do. As the diplomatic session continued, Admiral Kexthara found herself reflecting on the strange trajectory that had brought her from commander of an intimidation mission to participant in galactic peace negotiations. The humans had somehow transformed their certain destruction into the foundation of a new interstellar order. Admiral Webb, she said during a brief recess, can I ask what you think would have happened if your quantum cascade device hadn't worked? Webb smiled that unsettling human smile. Admiral Kexthara, we never actually tested it. What? The quantum cascade device was purely theoretical. We had no idea if it would work. But you threatened my entire fleet with it. Admiral, We threatened your fleet with the possibility that it might work. From a human perspective, possibly functional and definitely functional, represent roughly the same tactical advantage. Admiral Kexthara stared at the human admiral with renewed respect and horror. You bluffed your way through the entire confrontation? Admiral, we prefer to think of it as aggressive optimism, though I suppose the practical difference is minimal. As she walked back into the conference room, Admiral Kexthara realized that the humans had not only revolutionized galactic diplomacy, but had done so using the most human approach possible, making things up as they went along and somehow convincing everyone else it was brilliant. The formal peace treaty between the Hegemony and the Free Galactic Coalition would be signed 3 months later aboard the UES Indomitable, forever establishing the most unlikely diplomatic venue in galactic history. Captain Webb's threat to defend Earth with a possibly fictional weapon had accidentally ended an age of imperial expansion and begun an era of cooperative interstellar civilization. The galaxy would never be quite the same again, which, from a human perspective, was exactly the point.